I thought I'd start with a quote today, which is from Gregory Bateson. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of him. He was a polymath who lived through most of the 20th century, born in the UK and lived out most of his career in the US. And he was really a forefather to systems thinking. So he was actually created some of the first family dynamics systems thinking, which has led to psychotherapy and coaching. And one of the things he said was the major problems in the world today are the result of the difference between how nature works and the way that people think. And I really like this quote. Nature works in systems, right? And if we are nature, we are also part of these systems. And what Bateson showed us was that the integrity of the relationships in that system is what gives it its health. And by being aware of those relationships, we can choose to protect the health of the system rather than break the health of the system. And as coaches, we understand well, don't we, the importance of relationships. And we help clients make meaning in their lives. But how many of us encompass this wider system, including nature, in our work? So I'm going to start by inviting you to do a bit of thinking, a bit of remembering. And this is from a practice, from a book, Being in Nature. And one of the ways that we can access our relationship to nature is through our memories. So I'm just going to invite you to sit comfortably for a couple of minutes. You might like to close your eyes. That often helps us to remember things. And perhaps as we're just sitting here, just take a few quiet breaths. And just let ourselves settle, let our feet flat on the floor. Let our shoulders drop. Feel our belly moving as we're breathing. Then I'd like you to think back to a happy memory of nature from your childhood or your youth. Somewhere attractive, somewhere safe, somewhere you could be yourself. See if you can take yourself back there for a moment. What were the sights and the sounds? What people were there with you? What feelings do you remember getting from your experience of wildlife and the natural world?
What's that? No.
Somebody go on mute, please. We're in the middle of a practice. Thank you. So back in that memory for a moment, just have a think about what was beautiful about it. What was beautiful about that time or that experience? What were the senses and emotions that I was experiencing at that time? Or maybe what comes alive in you now? Are there some senses or some emotions that come up now for you? And so when you're ready, you can come back into the room. I ask this question a lot in workshops and webinars, and it's surprising how many people talk about these memories with real clarity, and they can really remember how it felt. I hope that you can. If anyone wants to put any of your memories into the chat, please do. Might be nice to share if you're willing to do that. And places and times like this are meaningful because they are usually places and times when we could be ourselves. We could really express ourselves freely, right? We could exercise our intrinsic drives and our motivation. We could be autonomous. We could learn things. We could belong, right? Somewhere, usually with our family or with some friends in that place. And so they're meaningful. And they're meaningful because of the relationships involved to ourselves, to our special people around us, and to the natural place as well. Just look at the the chat here and see if anyone's added any memories. Someone had a flashback of walks in the Malvern Hills and the smell of rain and the sneeze of hay fever. Mark, I remember the sneeze of hay fever. Somebody remembers catching and releasing frogs in a local wetland with other children and feeling the water between their toes. Somebody else remembers water in a coffee farm, sitting with a grandmother on the rocks, just peace and the water singing. And Jonathan remembers strong smell of cow parsley playing hide and seek. Oh, thank you for sharing those. They're lovely, lovely memories. And so what we're going to do in our session today is something of an inquiry, and hopefully it's a meaningful one, and it's an inquiry about meaning. And what we're going to be looking at is, well, what is meaning? And then we're going to explore that through some questions. First of all, how is nature meaningful to me? And how am I meaningful to nature? It's a reciprocal inquiry. And what does this say about my purpose? And that could be your purpose as a human being, it could be your purpose as a coach, or both. So we're going to do that with the help of some models. I'm going to share a couple of models with you. Hopefully they're useful, and you might like to have a notebook to hand because I'm going to ask you some questions and I'd like you to write down the answers. Please use the chat as we go to share any thoughts that you've got, and be ready for some discussions in small groups as well, which we're going to set up later. So, what is meaning? Big question. There's a professor from Stanford who I like called Brian Lowry, and he did a TED talk, which is great. I really recommend it, about meaning. And he said that meaning is about coherence, purpose, and significance. So coherence is about providing a structure and a framework for our life that we can understand and which makes sense. Right? Purpose is about what we desire in our lives. And significance is giving us some means of transcending ourselves, right? And thinking about something greater than us, our ego, me, myself, and I. I think those three lenses are really useful. And one of the things that I notice about them is that it's about relationships. Right? It's about the sum of the parts, the relationships between them, and the integrity of these relationships, which is really important to making meaning in life. I'll probably quote Gregory Bateson a couple more times in this hour, but he said that it's not a thing that is significant or meaningful by itself. It's only significant and meaningful in its relationship to another thing or other things. And as coaches, we do that, don't we? We try and draw out connections and interconnections and help create perspective and views for people. I don't have the mute all button here, but can everyone just double check that they're on mute, please, because that would be really helpful and not distracting. One of the things he said as a sort of slight joke was, you know, how many people believe that we've got 5 fingers on a hand, and he said we're wrong. Actually, we don't have 5 fingers on our hand. That's not the important thing. The number 5. That's not what we've evolved to have 5 of something. We've evolved to have 4 pairs of relationships between those fingers. That's what makes our hands useful and meaningful. The next point here about what meaning is then is that it's relational, and it's relational to a system and to a context and to a situation. It's also about the present, the future, and the past. The past is a bit of a taboo in coaching, isn't it? We're told not to go there because that's the territory of therapists. But of course, the past informs everything that we do and shapes what meaning we have made in our lives, as you shared when you had to think about your early memories. and therefore sets a context by which we might think about the present and then the future. So the past is really important. As a coach, sometimes I ask my clients to tell me, give me their 2-minute life history as a means of building a relationship with them at the beginning. And sometimes when I'm doing nature-based work, I might ask my client to tell me their natural history. So tell me about yourself and your life, but also your life in context of your relationship with the natural world. And some of you have been doing that already on this webinar. And meaning, of course, relates to the coaching process. And we here are mainly, I guess, International Coaching Federation members. So we know our coaching process includes the co-creation of agreements that are meaningful, right, to the client, that we have trust and safety in our relationship. That is also needs to be meaningful, that we can evoke meaningful awareness, which is a particular part of our competency framework where meaning sits. And sometimes we draw on metaphors to help us do that, or ceremonies or rituals or other tools. And then through that process, we foster what we call client growth. But I would argue that nature-based coaching is interested not just in client growth for their own sake, but in transcending that and helping the client think about the growth that they can influence with the system that they're part of. And that's kind of what nature-based coaching is. So nature-based coaching, for those that haven't come across this before, is a partnership which includes the natural world as well as the client. And so therefore, it's not just about the individual that we're supporting, but it's also about that more global well-being of the system the client operates in. It's about deepening our connection with nature, and we'll talk in a bit about how that's useful for us, and therefore releasing collective potential, not just individual potential. Bateson again said, the organism's interaction with the environment is the basic unit of learning. So I'd argue that if we're going to fully enable our clients to learn as part of a coaching process, we need to consider their interaction with their environment. Okie dokie. So have a look at this picture for a second and have a think about which of those circles represents your relationship with the natural environment today. See if you can pick one. You don't have to share this, but you're welcome to. Maybe we could number them left to right and top to bottom, 1 to 7 or something in our minds. I wonder which one of those strikes you, do you think, as summing up where you're at? Yeah, some scores coming in. Thank you. Quite a range, and that's absolutely normal and to be expected. And one of the keys with this scale and other scales is to compare ourselves to ourselves over time rather than ourselves to other people. Yeah, I wonder how that feels to you to have the score that you have, or to have the image that you have in front of you there. Does that feel right? Does it feel like you'd like it to be stronger or less strong in terms of the amount of overlap? Another way we could think about the benefits, if you like, of our relationship with nature is through something that I'm going to share with you now, which I call the nature connection cycle. And you can have a copy of this afterwards. I can send you a copy. So I'll reveal it sort of chunk by chunk, but the cycle first looks at what are the values, what's at play when we're in nature. So we think about time outdoors in some of these lovely spaces that you've been sharing in the chat so far. We know that generally being in these places is good for our health and well-being, right? It turns off generally, if these places are safe, turns off our fight, flight, freeze sympathetic nervous system response, and it turns on our rest and digest systems, which are linked to trust and creativity and memory recall and stress reduction and boosted immune systems. And there's lots of ingredients of nature acting on us: fractals, sunlight, soil bacteria, plant chemicals, the sounds of birds or water, and so on. So in a way, we can activate our senses and our emotions when we're in nature in ways that are good for our health and well-being, and are sometimes quite passive. Just by being outside, is generally speaking, it's good for us because it's where we've evolved as a species, right? For most of our life on this planet. But the cycle then takes us round to thinking about, well, if that's being in, what would it be to be with nature? And there's a couple of pathways that we can walk down that help us feel more with nature. The first of those is natural beauty. So noticing what's beautiful about this place that we're in, stopping and really taking it in and appreciating it, engaging with it, so that it's not a passive exercise, it starts to become an active exercise. And being with nature has shown time and again to release loads of benefits for us as people that we don't get simply by being in nature passively. So, for example, people who spend more time with nature in this way, thinking about natural beauty, thinking about what their relationship to nature means to them, tend to feel more nature connected. They tend to have a more overlapping set of circles than some other people. And those that feel more interconnected, generally speaking, feel more satisfied with their lives. And this is solid, sound science. This is not wishy-washy stuff. Feel satisfied with their lives. They have higher self-esteem. They have greater self-confidence. They have a lot of things that our clients come to us for in coaching, right? Let's make, how many client goals have we had around confidence and self-confidence? So isn't that interesting that just by being in relationship with and engaging with the natural world, we can boost all of these things for ourselves. And then there's on part of that, on the right-hand side of that meaning, sorry, on the left-hand side, that meaning around community and relationships is that when we are noticing nature in that way, perhaps sometimes when we're experiencing awe and wonder outdoors, it actually helps us feel kinder towards our fellow human. So there's lots of studies on this, really interesting ones looking at ethical decision making, levels of generosity and levels of friendliness, levels of loneliness, all of which significantly boosted when people are experiencing a connection with nature outdoors. So in really meaningful ways, we can enhance our lives through nature connectedness. And then the last one is being for nature. The science is pretty clear around this as well, that the most nature-connected people have been shown to exhibit twice as much pro-environmental behavior, so good choices about minimizing their footprint on the environment, and 3.5 times more nature conservation friendly behavior, so pro-nature behavior, whether that's how they manage their garden, whether they belong to a wildlife NGO, whether they're volunteering, and whether they're doing other things that are positive for nature. And we know the state of the world, we know about our climate crisis, we know about our ecological crisis. And the good news is that these individual behavior changes can add up and they can make a significant contribution towards those crises in slowing and reversing some of them. So as coaches, we have the opportunity working with nature in a way that enhances our coaching process. It helps our clients with their outcomes and find meaning in the world, but it also hopefully helps our clients give back more and ourselves give back more to the planet that we depend on. So it's a virtuous circle, this nature connection cycle. And the more action we take, the more nature connected we feel, and we go around the loop again. So I have a question for you now. This is where it gets interactive again. The question is, in what ways is nature meaningful to me? And I'd like you to answer that in the following format. Nature is meaningful to me because, and then fill in the blanks, X and Y and maybe Z. So in what way am I meaningful to nature? And the answer is nature is meaningful to me because X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to ask you to think about that for a minute on your own. And then I'm going to invite you to join a breakout room. And I'd like you to have a conversation with 2 or 3 other people about what you found out. Well, hopefully you've had a good chance to reflect on this question, at least by yourself. Hello, everybody. Welcome back in. I think everyone should be back in now. Yes, lovely. So I hope you had an interesting conversation. Would anyone like to share a little bit of it? Just sort of come off mic and tell you maybe personally what you found, what you decided about why nature is meaningful to you, and perhaps a flavor of your conversation, just for a couple of minutes. Don't be shy.
I, yeah, I mean, we had a really good conversation, and it probably was international, stretching between, what was it, Wales and Switzerland and Mexico, and I think it just highlighted the way that nature-based coaching can be really sort of good for that team-based coaching stuff as well. You know, that social connection and that grounding, I think, was a real commonality between it. And there's some interest in your book as well, James.
Oh, well, that's always nice. But yeah, thanks, Mark. That team point's a good point, isn't it? And I must admit, because I tend to do most of my work as one-to-one, I don't always think about that. But when you think about that system, I guess, when you're working with a team, perhaps you know, a top team at work or something, and they're thinking about their organizational system, then there's lots of ways that we can reflect on the organization's role with the resources that they depend on to thrive, or the impact that they make on the world. So yeah, that's a nice observation. Thank you. So hopefully you've got an answer to this question written in the format, nature is meaningful to me because X and Y. The next question is, in what way am I meaningful to nature? And I'm going to suggest that you put the same reasons in the boxes X and Y. So I am meaningful to nature because of the very same reasons that nature is meaningful to me. Maybe just scribble that down for a minute and see what comes out. And thanks, Sarah, for your comment about nature affecting us emotionally, physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. And I guess we can affect nature too, at least physically, can't we? If not also through some of those other dimensions. I bring care for nature. Do you feel, Robin, that nature cares for you at the same time?
I do. I concur.
You feel willing to say a little bit more about that?
I mean, I was saying in my breakout, like just the way it feels to be like in a woods and in a wooded area. While I like beach and open, there's just something really supportive and nurturing and caring about feeling like the woods feel sort of like a hug.
Yeah, I totally get that idea of a hug. I've certainly had that experience from sort of valleys and places like that where you can feel enclosed as well. Mark says we're part of and codependent and interconnected. Yeah, all of those words.
James, I've had a go at swapping the words around. So
Go for it, John.
in the breakout, I said nature is meaningful to me because it triggers awe and wonder. And just swapping that around, I'm meaningful to nature because, and I was thinking, I can't inspire awe and wonder in nature, but it did make me think that actually, when you stop in the street and you're looking face to face with a fox, you are having a connection with them. So actually, nature is having a relationship with me. And when you're feeding the birds or listening to the birds, so I hadn't thought of that before actually. That it wasn't just me getting benefit from nature. Actually, there is a flow between you and nature.
How interesting. Yeah, that's very powerful. And I guess as urban citizens, we don't encounter large mammals, right? Non-human mammals very often. Perhaps colleagues in the States, that might hunt or have a relationship with the land or have animals probably encounter that quite regularly, that sort of mutual acknowledgement, respect, and maybe, yeah, awe and wonder. Wow, how a nice idea. Thank you. So we've got a couple of comments here. One that says, nature's meaningful to me, Alejandra, because it's an opportunity to stop and enjoy important things that you tend to forget. Yeah, absolutely. Rushing in a busy city, that's very familiar. Claire says a blackbird was enjoying some awe with her bivy bag, kept dive bombing it. Was this a camping or something experience? Is that what you mean by a bivy bag?
Yeah, I sleep wild quite often, and
Oh, wow.
I guess, yeah, it's, you think you're being wild, but obviously you're not. I've had that before with other animals. They're quite curious because you're in their space.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, they'll come and have a look.
Thanks, Staza. I'm going to just show you a quick clip now that I filmed last week just to inspire some final thoughts from you. So you may watch this moment of awe and wonder. So I think as Staza said, we are nature and we tend to forget it, but even taking a moment to watch a clip like that can remind us and give us a sense of being part of a larger system, right? That's what awe and wonder is, that we feel small and there's this bigger thing that's magnificent and a bit hard to understand and quite complex and a bit wow. And we can find that under a tall tree like this redwood, or find it by gazing at some moss on a brick or a plant in your house. So one of the things that we can do to anchor this meaning that we've been exploring today is to attach it to something. So hopefully you've developed something on your pad, something that says something about your sense of what is meaningful about nature to you, or how you might be meaningful to nature. And maybe I just invite you finally just to think about how you anchor that bit of new awareness. And there's lots of ways that we can do that in coaching, and nature-based coaching is fantastic for things like metaphor. Metaphors really help us make sense of the world. So is there a metaphor that somehow represents this awareness that you've created on this session today for you? Another way you might think about doing it is some kind of ceremony or ritual. We have in our cultures lots of ways in which we celebrate our part of nature. Maybe there's something else that you can do to attach your awareness, make it feel a bit more concrete and real as we're coming to a final bit of the session. And that is our last question. So what does what you found out today, do you think, say about your purpose? And this is a big question, right? Making a start here. But what have you kind of got, do you think, already about how your work as a coach, for example, relates to nature and what that says about your purpose and your work's purpose? So maybe you might like to finally just jot down an answer to that question. So, which leaves us with some contact details and some time for any questions, a bit of a discussion. I can take the slides down in a minute and we can do that. Anyone who would like to stay on, you can find me here. I have training in nature-based coaching for coaches, going through ICF accreditation at the moment. And you can also subscribe and become part of our irregular newsletters with some free resources there for coaches, lots of links to webinars and podcasts and other things that hopefully you would find interesting.